What's up, you guys? My name is Levi. Welcome to another Alliteration Gaming video, and today I have with me the boy, the legend, none other than Willy T himself, to show you guys the Endeavor Fire deck that he took top 8 with in one of the Vegas Provisionals. Willy T, take it away, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll obviously start with the man, the myth, the legend, Endeavor. He is a 30 health, 6-hand character. He has the enhance where his non-throw attacks are going to get +1 damage for every 6 cards in your discard pile. And he also has a response. When he takes 5 damage from any attack, he can commit himself in order to pick up any attack out of your discard pile. So what we really want with this Fire Endeavor deck is a bunch of high-impact attacks for you to pick back up and to reuse. With an 80-card deck, it's hard to get the level of consistency that you expect out of something that's closer to 50 or 60. So you have to be sure that all of your attacks are really impactful.
Yeah, so it seems like the goal is to just kind of make a deck of 80 good cards that no matter what combination you see, you're kind of in a good boat no matter what.
Exactly. There's a lot of self-mill that's in this deck, so you can accelerate that extra damage. But it's also enough cards that you don't cycle and reset yourself.
Right, because once you cycle, your character just doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, it's very hard to win from that game state. So let's go ahead and get into the attacks. I want to start with a bit of an all-star for the
fans.
For the fans is 4 copies of Long-Lasting Explosion. This particular attack is really, really good with the next 2 that we'll talk about. But the other element of this attack is just it is very aggressively statted for a 5 difficulty attack.
Yeah, 5 speed is a lot.
Yeah, especially in a deck that doesn't have a huge amount of speed bonus. In order to work around block zones, I had to be very particular about the cards that I was able to include because, spoiler alert, the block zones on this deck are not particularly balanced. So I had to kind of work around that and make some deck building choices in order to make sure that I was facilitating that the best I could.
Yeah, Fire is pretty infamous for not having great block zones.
Yes. But Long-Lasting Explosion lets your next attack be that much more threatening, be it much faster if it's a high attack, or much more damage if it's a mid attack. So you really get to play around with what this card does for you with the rest of the attack lineup. So to follow that up, we have 4 copies of Hellflame Cross Punch. Long-Lasting Explosion facilitates this card being online much earlier in the game because what it requires for its enhance is that you have to hit at least an 8 damage threshold in order to mill 2 for 3 extra speed. So it becomes a 7 mid for 8 minimum. That is really, really easy to achieve, especially after a long-lasting explosion. It's very easy to make that happen with Endeavor. The other part of this card that's really important is being able to block with it and return it to your hand. It helps you keep yourself alive while still sculpting a kill hand that's very, very threatening. After that, one of the small regrets is that I only run this at 3 copies for this tournament, is Turn to Dust. This card is incredible in Endeavor. One of the best ways that you can make something basically unblockable is to stun down their board. And so we'll see some choices in the foundations that I made that make this card so much more impactful in this character than he would otherwise be, as well as the EX2 being a very important part of this. With Endeavor being so centered on his discard pile, it's very useful to be able to use both of the enhances on this particular card in order to not only fuel your graveyard or your discard pile, but also to impact your opponent's board in a way that puts them behind. Putting your opponent behind puts you in charge of the game, and that's a really good way to do it, is to make things that they just can't answer. So that's what Turn to Dust's job is. Next, we have our 4 diff attacks, starting with 4 copies of Ice Storm. I sometimes feel like 4 copies of it is a little excessive, but having a break or 2 that you can pick up with your response is incredibly potent to just turn off opponents' turns, especially if you have one in hand already. It's a great way to really make sure that your opponent just doesn't get to do what they want to do to you.
I mean, with 30 health, you're down to half block stuff all day if you can get Breaker 2 in there.
Absolutely. And the other reason that it is at 4, this is the only ranged attack in the deck. And I do run, spoiler alert, I run Self-Assured at 4 copies because it's kind of a necessity in this deck. So I want that enhance on Self-Assured to be live on occasion. Next is another all-star in the deck, and that is 4 copies of Touch of Decay. This card is absolutely incredible in this deck because you're able to pump up its damage and make sure that it's very, very threatening and force your opponent into a really bad choice. Do I half block it and take a bunch of damage? Do I full block it and let him have it back? Or do I not block it and let him draw a card? There is no good option when this card hits the table in the mid to late game. It's just a big threat that your opponent has to deal with. It may be a bit slow, but it's gonna draw a block, no matter if that is a partial or a full. Next is a favorite of mine, and that is 4 copies of Confident Counterstrike. You have no fear of blocking with attacks in Endeavor. You actually kind of want to. It lets you keep things and keep a bank of attacks in your discard pile that you can pick up and then use to threaten your opponent. Additionally, since this has an enhance that gives it additional damage when the previous attack has been blocked, it's really synergistic with what Endeavor does because you want to throw a bunch of haymakers that they have to deal with. And it forces blocks, and then you get to punish them for blocking you. It's a really good way to do that, and it's also a great way to interrupt your opponent's turn with a block. If they have a 10 damage move, you love nothing more than slamming down a Confident Counterstrike, half blocking, eating the 5, picking up a new attack, and then going, cool, discard 1 or take 2.
Yeah, I mean, the combination of like this and Ice Storm just like sitting in your discard pile being constant threats when your opponent's trying to like swing at you, it's kind of messed up.
Yeah, it is really rude. And it's a great way to make sure that you're keeping yourself alive because you use you kind of weaponize your life total. You sacrifice a bit of it in order to fuel that offense for later. The last attack is 3 copies of Signature Right Swing. This one is here for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, it's a low block, which it's really important in this deck, and having all of your block zones covered in your attack lineup is very important with Endeavor. Being able to pick up what you need when you do see someone pick up a particular zone is really, really good. And it also helps you sculpt. Discard 2 to draw 2 on an attack is very impactful because it lets you get past that Taiyaki Fanatic and actually be able to sculpt your hand even a little bit better. So it's a fantastic attack. Plus, throwing this down after a long-lasting explosion lets you sculpt, and it's a fast attack that you are getting to pump the damage with your face.
I mean, discard 2 is 2 more cards in the discard pile.
It is. It absolutely is. Well, cool. So that brings us to the end of the attack lineup. So let's go ahead and talk about foundations. And I'm going to go in descending order on difficulty. Let's start with 4 copies of Defrosting. This has a once per turn, you mill 1 card, and then you choose to give whatever attack it happens to be, either +2 speed and -1 damage, or -1 speed and +2 damage. And it's a great synergistic tool with not only Endeavor's kit, but some of the other foundations that are in this list. It combos really well with Heroic Lineage. Being able to force a damage bonus on your opponent while giving them -4 speed is a really good defensive tool, but also sacrificing 1 damage for +2 speed on your own attacks while also fueling your discard pile is also an incredibly potent tool to have available to you. And being able to use multiple copies on your board is really, really nice because it accelerates your game plan so much more.
Yeah, this card's just like a crazy engine in and of itself.
Yup. Next is 4 copies of League Interview. That first form is absolutely incredible. Being able to mill 2 to give +1 to your check to play your next attack is really, really nice on those turns that you just want to get things going. And I'll even do it pretty much every turn, even if I don't plan on playing an attack. just being able to get more cards in my discard in order to accelerate my game plan for the later parts of the game is really, really important. And being able to flip it to give +1 to your check to block is another defensive tool that this deck desperately needs.
Yeah, I mean it's nice, right? Because like it makes extra copies a little more useful because you like have to play 4 because you want to see it.
Yep.
And then you start seeing multiples, you're like, well, that's not that great, so you can at least make it self-useful.
Yeah.
And like you just like almost always want to open with a 5 diff in this deck.
100%.
So having like that little padding to your check is really nice.
Yeah, and all of your 5 diff attacks are so impactful. They are either massive or fast or both. Next is 4 copies of Rebel at his Masterpiece. This is another integral part of the deck. It gives you a mill 1 for a damage, which lets you, if you have on turn 2 long lasting into Hellflame Cross Punch, you give the 3 damage from long lasting into it. You mill 1 for Revel for an extra damage. Now you meet that threshold to mill 2 and give yourself the speed. And then you still have Endeavor's Enhance to add more damage on top of it, which you can get to that next 6 break point as you need. The form for if you are below 10 cards in your deck is also absolutely incredible, though with this size of deck, it doesn't come up nearly as often as you would like. But it's a really good contingency plan for when you get to that point and you're just like, you're gonna die this turn.
Yeah, it's a matter of when I get to this point, not if.
Yeah, exactly. And like most of the time, you want your opponent to be dead by the time that you get to that point, but it is a fantastic insurance policy. Next, 4 copies of Self-Assured, like I alluded to before. This card is incredibly potent in this deck because it lets you change your opponent's attack zones, and that is so much more impactful in this deck, given the scarcity of off-zone blocks and the impact of the mid blocks that you have with both Ice Storm and with Confident Counterstrike. It's kind of a fallacy that I had to learn where you want to use Endeavor's response every turn, and that's not the case. You would much rather preserve your life total and utilize that for damage that you know is coming that you cannot stop, and make sure that you are prepared for the next blow, rather than just take hits every turn and pick up more attacks, because it does stunt your build turns.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of when you're trying to sculpt versus when you're not trying to sculpt.
Exactly.
Right? And sometimes it's much better to just be like, okay, well, hey, look, my deck doesn't have great block zones, and I have this crazy Breaker 2 mid block and this crazy Counter-Strike mid block that you want to just full block stuff with all day.
Yep, absolutely. And full blocking things with Endeavor, it feels very good because you really want to preserve that life total. Next, 4 copies of Frozen. And this is probably my favorite card of the deck.
I hate this card.
It's so brutal with Endeavor because, like I was saying, with Turn to Dust, being able to tap down your opponent's foundations and reduce the resources they have to block you with is so much more impactful when every attack that you throw is worth half their life total. So utilizing this to not only fuel your discard, but also get rid of those foundations, keep yourself out of deadlock, and tap down your opponent's board is a really, really impactful way to weaponize every bit of your board and every card that you play. Especially considering there are some do-nothing cards in this deck sometimes. So getting rid of those and turning them into something that's more impactful is really, really beneficial to you.
It's also a very nice off-zone.
Yes, it is. Next, as alluded to before, we have 3 copies of Heroic Lineage. This is going to combo with your defrostings incredibly well, but it's also just a fantastic defensive tool against anyone who is pumping their damage on their own. It's a great way to make sure that you are protecting yourself, protecting that life total, because -4 speed is a lot. It's hard to deal with between this and the defrosting, and sometimes it's okay to make something really slow but also really big, because then you can half block it and pick up an attack. So sometimes forcing your opponent into that break point of 9 or 10 damage is really impactful for you.
I mean, you do have a few ways you can pocket this on your own as well, right? You can do the Hellflame Cross Punch,
yep,
or long lasting into any high attack that'll come in with the stat bonus.
Yep, absolutely. Next is 3 copies of Latent Skill. This is probably the card that I found the least impactful in the deck because Taiyaki Fanatic exists. But it's still very impactful in those matchups where Taiyaki is not on the board. Being able to discard 2 to draw 2 lets you both sculpt and fuel yourself for later. And it's a nice off-zone block. In a later iteration of this deck, I did replace it with Cool Student because I did find myself with more momentum than I thought I would ever have in most of the games that I was playing. And being able to use that momentum for something else was really, really good. But this is the profile as it got me to top 8, so that's what I want here. But I'm also going to throw out the suggestions of what I think were better in my future iterations. Next is 4 copies of Arrogant Disposition. We like our 6 checks and we like our low blocks. Not a whole lot to say about this card. It just happens to be very synergistic with what's going on. And it's very good in those punch matchups that do come up from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a very, very well static card. A 2 low block on a 6 check spam is just really,
very, very good. Very,
and
very
like
good.
Sometimes it has an effect that's extremely powerful.
Yup. Next, another card that is incredibly impactful in this deck because of the amount of Furies is Villainous Entrance. Being able to utilize Villainous Entrance alongside a Turn to Dust and a Frozen is one of the most rude things that you can do in this deck to your opponent. I love to throw this card down on a Turn to Dust, utilize the Enhance to give it an extra instance of Stun 1, stun something else down, and then blow it up with either Frozen or the Turn to Dust itself in order to make sure that I am removing more and more of my opponent's resources throughout the rest of that game. Next are 4 copies of Forcing Surrender. This is very impactful because of Faith Shield, turning all of your stuff face down when it gets blocked, being able to free up the extra space in order to turn on the combo enhance for Touch of Decay is very important. But additionally, it has that incidental enhance to discard the incidental response to use a combo and discard an opponent's momentum is really, really helpful to keep down those momentum-based decks and kind of preserve your ability to fight past them. Hitting the tail end of things here with 4 copies of Keen Observation. This has some incidental synergy with both Turn to Dust as well as Confident Counterstrike. But it also is just a good off-zone block that this deck needs in a 0-diff. And then rounding out the foundations are 4 copies of Internship with Best Genist. Since you have the Earth symbol on your character card, you get to use the response on this to mill 1 and force your opponent to flip a foundation. It's good early, it's good late, and it's a good target to blow up with Frozen once you have that opportunity and it's on board. Because once it's on board, it does significantly less than when it's in the card pool.
Yeah, this is just like a free mill in Endeavor.
It is.
Can't really go wrong with that.
Not at all. Alright, to round out the main deck, we have 8 actions. We have 4 copies of Capture Evildoers. This is absolutely fantastic for not only stealing momentum from your opponent and pinpoint removing things that are obnoxious to deal with, it's also a Breaker 1 block, and you can also use the form to remove cards from your own card pool for those turns where you've sculpted a hand of 5 or 6 attacks and really just go off. And then last but not least, 4 copies of Evil Gaze. This card puts in a lot of work against opponents who aren't expecting it, being able to punish them even further with your blocks, or give an extra incentive to take an attack, or put something over that unblockable point where they just cannot handle it anymore, is such a great way to utilize this card. And it has a little bit of deadlock pressure as well, being able to pinpoint remove things that you don't want going on. So that rounds out the main deck. As far as the side deck, this is pretty mutable. It is kind of it's going to be meta choices for your local or tournament meta. But I am running 2 copies of Concentrate. It's really good to cancel some of these really high impact actions such as Sugar Rush, Capture Evildoers, Evil Gaze, all the things that I'm already running. Dark Shadow.
Gotta cancel those Dark Shadows, dude.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. But these are great to handle that, plus it's an extra low block. 4 copies of Fulfilled My Duty. This one seems a little bit sus, but it'll make a little bit more sense in a moment. But it's really good to turn off enhanced steps in some cases and fuel your discard while you're at it. Just being able to go, you get 1 enhance, and then it's over. That's it. It's really, really impactful. Next are 3 copies of Blue Flame Spiral. This is really impactful for asset-laden matchups. And being able to pick these up and recycle them from your discard with Endeavor, really, really impactful. Plus, in those situations where you need more low blocks, this is a really good card to side in. And then last but not least, we do have 1 character to side, and that is Tenya Ida 1.
The boy!
The boy. I think this card's actually really impactful in this particular deck. Even though you don't get benefits out of the self-mill, you instead turn everything faster, tax them for enhancing, and then also have the option with the 4 Fulfilled My Duties in the side to be able to just go, cool, you have to answer this right now. And that's the only option that you have. And so that's the deck. This is what took me to top 8 in the 3rd Provisional in Vegas. It's an absolutely hilariously fun deck. The amount of damage that you're able to put on every attack can just get very difficult for any opponent to get through. Most of the time in my games, I was averaging 6 to 8 damage on every attack that was thrown, and I was usually throwing 4 to 5 of them in a turn, because you get to sculpt and just survive for so long being a 30 health character and being able to pick up your own attacks with either the block zone that you need or just being able to set up when you know they're out of gas and throw a ton of damage their way. It's hilarious to just splat 7-handers who get overconfident and overextend.
Yeah, this deck is hilarious. Like it comes across as a very, very like genuine, honest deck, and it is in a lot of ways, but it very much has the energy of like, hey, if you let me get to like turn 9 or 10, man, like you just die in like 2 hits.
Yeah, it's very fun, like seeing someone take a couple of hits in the early game and put themselves to sub 10 health. They have to perfect block for the entire rest of the game from that point on. Or they just die. It's so brutal, and it's such a mentally taxing game state for your opponent to exist in, where they know that they have to block everything perfectly, or they'll just lose.
Yeah, well, hey man, if that's all you've got to say, Will, thank you so much for coming on and showing this this totally out the freaking box Endeavor deck, man.
Oh yeah, it's such a fun deck to play. I absolutely encourage you to play it if you get the opportunity, and just watch your opponent's jaw drop as you're throwing 12, 14 damage moves at them.
Well, guys, thank y'all so much for watching. If you guys have any feedback, comments, or criticism, or if you have any experience of Endeavor with yourself, let me know down below. I'd love to get some discussion going. I'm sure Will would love to talk more Endeavor builds as well. I know you've built them on every symbol at this point,
I've
or less.
Built them on every symbol.
This is kind of just your more tried and true one.
This is my favorite way to play them. There's a lot of cool things that Fire has, and it's also just so flavorful. It's so flavorful.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and I guess we just we can't wait to see what the Endeavor trial deck holds. To see how spruced up this bad boy gets.
Bring me more Endeavor cards. I need it.
Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one. This has been Levi and Willy T. Peacing out.